Hello, JK here from Animator Island. You may be used to seeing Ferdinand here on the Animator Island live stream, but I'm giving it a shot today because I've got a project coming up that I figured I would share with everybody, and I don't quite yet know what I'm doing. So this is a little bit of a learn as you go process for me, but Ferdinand is an expert already, so I'm sure it will be fine. Right now, I am working on figuring out where I need to uh, link to off if I want to send it off on Twitter because I don't even know that much. But you know what? It'll be fine. I told people that they could come hang out. All right. So, just a couple technical things before we jump in entirely. Can you guys hear me okay and see me okay and all that stuff? If you wouldn't mind typing in the chat real quick that you could see and hear me. That way I know that the technical side of things are working. I also have somebody across the office, hopefully trying to log in and see if it works. And she says it does. So good. Okay. Ice Cream Hero also says that it does. So I appreciate that. Okay. Well, hey, everybody. How's it going? I have not been here on the live stream in a while. Ferdinand's been taking lead on all the Animator Island stuff. But some interesting things are happening over in my end of the world. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about it today. And it revolves around art style. The other thing is I've got my trusty iPad with me, and we're going to try to stream directly from that as well, which will be interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up while we're talking and see if it works, because that would be really cool if it does. We're working on a bunch of different things to try and get it to function. So let me click the share button and we'll see how it goes. Okay. All right, look at that. iPad, activate. That's a little early for me to be pulling that up, but I just wanted to make sure it worked. So we can shrink that down for a second and have a little bit of a chat, although it's probably going to go to sleep and then I'll have to do that all again. Hello, unknown animator. And so yeah, my name is JK, for those of you who don't know, because you're used to seeing Ferdinand. And here's the story. I recently turned 40 years old. And while I was doing that, I had a bit of an epiphany, or perhaps it would be better called an existential crisis. Because the other day, last month, I can't even remember at this point, I was walking down the street and I thought to myself, hey, wait a minute, why do I do art? You may know why you do art, but for some reason I had never asked myself that. So I had quite a bit to think about. And during that process, what I realized was that I've been doing art. I'm just going to close that window for a second because we don't need to see the iPad for now. I've been doing art for a very long time. And initially, I did it for a very particular reason. But over the course of my life, I lost that reason because that reason was mostly to get attention from first grown-ups and then my peers. And as I got older, which you may find happens with you as you get older, you stop caring too much what other people think. So the main reason that I did art for most of my life suddenly disappeared, and I never really stopped to think about, why do I do this in the first place? Which is kind of weird because I think about everything. I ask so many questions about everything that I think and do and say. I dig deep into philosophy and theology and all this heavy, heavy stuff, but I never applied that to art. So long story short, I came up with some better reasons than no reasons for doing art. And what I determined was that I need to kind of focus a little bit more, because most of my life I've just been coasting on the general skill that I have at art, and I never really applied myself fully. So what does that have to do with art style? Well, what I realized was that my art style that I presently have exists because I used to do comics. If you're familiar with the comic strip Foxtrot, it's a newspaper comic, one of my absolute favorites. I have a whole shelf in the library full of it. Foxtrot was like my be-all, end-all when I was young. And so I wanted to be just like Bill Ammond. I wanted to do that. So I copied a lot of his style and I incorporated some of my own stuff into that style. And that was the art style that I used most of my life. The challenge of that is that if you no longer want to do newspaper style comics, which I don't and haven't for a long time, you're kind of stuck with that style if that's what you developed. So basically, I needed to determine, firstly, do I want to keep doing art? And the answer to that was yes. And secondly, if I want to keep doing art, what do I want it to look like? Because I don't want it to look like what it always has looked like anymore. I want it to look different. I want it to look interesting. I want it to look not necessarily unique, but at least different than something you'd see in a newspaper. So today, again, we're going to talk about that sort of idea of art style, and I will fire back up the iPad and we'll discuss where I'm going with that. I've done a lot of research in the last month on the subject of art styles because it's not something that I really ever applied or ever really researched or studied deeply. My art style just kind of developed over time. I never really tried to make it something. So I wanted to know, firstly, can you make an art style? Like, can you actively pursue an art style? Can you, or is it just something that comes naturally to you, right? Am I just stuck drawing foxtrot style, but in my own way for the rest of my life? Because if that's the case, I don't really want to do that. Not to knock foxtrot, I still love it. It's just that's not what I want to do. So what I determined, what I was going to try to do, and part of this live stream and part of the upcoming live streams that I'll do, is to try to figure out if you can change your own art style, if you can actively force your art style to go in a certain direction, if you can make it what you want it to be instead of just kind of letting it happen. And I think you can. The question now is, can I do that after 40 years of trying a different art style? So here we go. We're gonna find out. And I'm gonna share screen again. So here's the process that I am using for finding an art style or developing my own art style in the way that I want to. Firstly, we'll go over to the gallery here. And if you look at the screen here, and it's kind of smaller, so let me see if I can, you don't need to see me as much. If you look at the bottom there, you'll see that there's 2,293 photos and 35 videos. So there's quite a lot of images here on this little iPad. And this is basically a collection over the last couple years. There's even more on my PC, but this is the collection over the last couple of years of when I've been, say, browsing Pinterest or going on different websites and things, and I've pulled art that speaks to me in some way. Whatever that might be. It might just be some like little shape in the corner, or it might be the entire piece. Whatever it is, something about it was compelling to me. So I started collecting kind of my own personal gallery. And I don't know if anybody out there has been doing that before or has in the past or anything, but it's a really great exercise because you can have this collection of art that you love and it's all at your fingertips. Some days I'll just fire up the iPad and I'll just browse for a while of my own curated collection and just see all these amazing works of art that I love. The problem, if there's a problem with this, is that there's 2,293 images here. That's too many. You get overwhelmed after a while. And so as I started to figure out how to develop my own art style, I realized, okay, look, I need to cull this 2,000 images down. I need to figure out a way to make it more reasonable, to make it more manageable, to not overwhelm me. So we're going to go to the side here. I have an album called Finding My Style. And in Finding My Style here, if we scroll to the bottom, you'll see I have 104 photos, which is a lot better than 2,000. Because with 104 photos, I have much more opportunity to really analyze what is it about each of these works that I love? what is it about them that I want to have in my own art style? YS Books says, or organize them differently. Yeah, I suppose I could organize 2,000 photos a bit differently. For now, I just decided to pick these 104 that were my favorite, or not even my favorite, but the things that made me want to do that kind of art, right? So when you're developing your own art style, you're not necessarily looking for, how do I put this? You're not necessarily looking for copying somebody else's style. You might do that, but if you can analyze what makes a piece by someone else or a collection of pieces that they've done, if you can analyze what it is about that that appeals to you, then you can start to incorporate that into your own work. And so if we pull up Procreate, what we'll see here is I have a collection here of specific pieces of art in different categories that I want to work on. So for example, I'll just read them off. We have female proportions, line quality, chunkiness and form, backgrounds, femininity, compelling story or curiosity, lighting, and then colors 1, colors 2, and colors 3. Colors 1, colors 2, and colors 3 will actually probably end up becoming colors 1 through 30, because what I determined when I spent so long just analyzing so far is that color for me is like a big deal. It really, really makes a difference for me. And I'm not good at it. So I think one of the, yeah, there you go. Hailey says, reminds me of a Pinterest. Yeah, it's like my own personal little Pinterest that's offline and doesn't try and sell me stuff all the time, because that seems to be what Pinterest does a lot. But yeah, so I put this together. So I was going back to color. Color is very compelling for me. I think one of the things that draws me to different art pieces is color. And I'm not particularly great at color because, well, I grew up wanting to do little comics in a newspaper style. And back in those days, the only color comics were on Sundays, and I liked the dailies better. So I only worked in black and white for a lot of my life, which makes a pretty substantial difference when later you're trying to start working with color. So there's probably going to be a lot of color boards here. But what I wanted to show you today, as we're jumping in and I'm kind of reintroducing myself to the Animator Island community, is that I'm going to go on a little bit of an exploration. We're going to talk about each of these different elements of art, from proportion to line quality to form, all sorts of different things. And we're going to go through each one together, and we're going to start figuring out what it is about them that maybe we like, or maybe we dislike, or whatever the case might be. And along the way, my hope is that I'm going to develop a style that will last me at least the next few years, if not the rest of my life. And hopefully I'll be able to take that style and run with it in a direction that I want to go, because 40 years is a long time to be doing one particular style of art. Now, obviously I wasn't doing it when I was 2 years old, but 30 years even is a long time to be doing one particular style of art. So I'm going to try and see if I can expand that style a little bit, but still focus on a very particular intentional way of doing art going forward. So that's about all I have to talk about today. The first official dive into this analysis is going to be related to female proportion. So I could talk a little bit about that, just kind of give a preview, but I'll talk more about it when we do that live stream. Essentially, as you probably know, when we are stylizing a human being, a human form, we're usually not copying exactly, right? We're usually pushing things a little bit. We're trying to as I've heard it said, turn things up to 11 visually. So we're taking a representation of the human form, and we're playing with proportions and different things like that. So what I've done in this first collection of images is I've found specific pieces that really appeal to me. And what's really interesting about that, and we'll talk more about that in that stream, is that this sort of appeal, this sort of very personal drawing in, is very personal, right? So this may be the proportions that I want to be able to draw, but it's not necessarily the proportions everyone else wants to draw. You know, somebody might really like working in a chibi style, or somebody might want to push things a lot more toward realism. And those things are totally okay, because your art really should be pretty personal. But I've collected these images together, and next time around, we're going to go through them and we're going to see what the exact proportions are of these things that I like so much. What are the elements that draw me in personally? And hopefully I can get some feedback from everybody here too. And we could talk about, you know, what you find appealing, what you dislike, what, you know, all that stuff. Because art is a beautiful, crazy, complicated thing, but there's a lot about it that it's hard to put into words, which I'm finding as I'm continuing to analyze things. So that's about it for today. There is a question here, which I think I can. Oh, I can. Unknown anime lover says, "Sir, I have a question about animation because I want to be a great traditional animator, and I'm from India." I do not see the question, but if you do want to ask that question before we wrap up for the day, by all means, feel free. Anybody else want to ask anything about art style specifically, or animation, or whatever it is? I'm here to chat if you're interested in a particular topic. When it comes to art style, I will share a few things before we wrap up on what I've learned about art style. I'm going to close this iPad because we don't need it for right now. I've confirmed that it works, so that's a good deal. Okay, so let's talk for a few minutes about art style before we wrap up. There are a lot of definitions of art style, and there are a lot of thoughts on art style. If you go on YouTube right now and you just type art style, you will find a lot of things. I know because I watched a lot of them. And what's fascinating about it is some videos will say art style is this and this and this. And then you'll click to the next one that says, did you ever hear that video that says art style is this and this and this? Well, that's a lie. Don't listen to that. You're like, what? So you really do have to kind of go through and see what other people have to say. But if you want my personal opinion, here's what I would say. Your art style is what you develop over time that kind of, they're cohesive elements that set you apart from everybody else, or that set you apart from your previous work, or set you apart from the work you'll do in the future. Sometimes it's very easy to tell an art style. So the example I like to use is The Simpsons. If you see an image done in The Simpsons style, you know exactly what style they were shooting for, right? You have other ideas like anime in general. Anime has a very broad but specific style. And then within anime, there's a lot of varying styles from there. So that's another kind of genre of style. Then you have very personal styles. If you are familiar with the artist Loish, she has a beautiful but very particular style. And there are a lot of artists that are living today and have become kind of famous because of social media and YouTube and things like that, that have these very distinct styles. So that's something that you kind of want to keep in mind, is that an art style that you will develop will be kind of personal to you, and it will happen over time. There's really not much you can do to stop an art style from happening. It's going to develop. You're going to have some particular voice visually that you put into all your work. But I think that you can also alter that, or I'm hoping that you can alter that, because once upon a time you had no art style. And that's the thing to really keep in mind. When you were a toddler, your art looked exactly like all the other toddler art. It was just a bunch of scribbled crayon lines. Everybody starts in the same place. And then over time, it develops into something else. So I think that art style can be changed, developed, all that sort of stuff. But we'll find out as we go. Okay, I got some questions in the chat, so let's talk about it. We have here from Shady on Fire. What about your view on the different 3D art styles? So So when it comes to 3D art styles, we can talk broadly. So for example, we can say, oh, the Pixar style. But if you dive down into Pixar style, you'll find that they're actually very different, right? Wall-E looks very different than, I don't know, Bug's Life. There are elements, because they're both 3D, and there are elements that are going to connect them. Maybe it's just the name Pixar on the box, but Pixar style, which a lot of people talk about, is not as easy to tie down as something like Disney, who generally, though they have been branching out a lot more, generally Disney had a very particular style. So you have 3D style in that way, and then you have much more realistic 3D styles. So a lot of video games now lean more heavily towards a realistic 3D style, but not all. So my own personal view of 3D art style is, I think that all art, and specifically animations, should serve whatever the purpose of that art is, right? So, for example, if you want to make a lighthearted story about a girl who gets lost in the forest and befriends a squirrel, let's say, I think you choose a lighthearted style to go with that, unless you're purposefully trying to change things so that there's a contrast between the style. But I think that the art style in 3D specifically, but in 2D too, should serve that sort of story or that purpose that you're making. So I hope that is a little bit helpful in that regard. Let's see. We got Hailey. I think it's Hailey, right? Hailey says, I've heard that styles are a way to play with naturalism, a realistic art style, and thus informed by that naturalism. That's an interesting way of putting it. What I would say to that, and we won't dive too heavily into the philosophy side, but here's what I'd say to that. How do I put this? In a sense, all we have to work with is nature, right? We are currently living physical lives, whether you believe in the soul or not, whether you think that materialism is accurate or not. Right now, the vast majority, if not all, of what we experience is nature. It's the natural. Even if it's stuff that we've made that we would call unnatural, it's still a part of the natural world, the natural universe. So in that sense, everything is going to be informed by that naturalism, right? You can create the weirdest, coolest, most creative thing that you could possibly dream of, and it's still, to some degree, going to be derivative of the universe we live in. Because there's an old saying, you don't know what you don't know, right? So we can't imagine what we can't imagine. But what we can imagine is the things that we've experienced in this world that we live in. So I would say that it is fair that all styles are going to be based in some way on the natural world, because that's what we have to work with, right? That's our starting point for like everybody. Oh, this is kind of went more philosophical than what I was thinking. I apologize. You'll see that happens a lot. We have another question here from a name that I apologize, but I cannot pronounce. It says, hi, if you're making a 2D cartoon, how many programs do you use, and where are you painting the backgrounds? Okay, so there are a lot of different animation softwares. There's a lot of different painting software available these days. For me, I personally really like Toon Boom, Animate, Harmony, all that. Forgive me, they changed their names a bunch of times. I've worked with that a lot. I used to work with Flash a lot. It wasn't a great program for animating, but it functioned, which is why I used it. And in terms of painting backgrounds, I am currently almost exclusively working in Procreate, because I have not found anything that is just so delightful to work in. I have a hard time doing art. Art is not easy for me. I don't know if anybody out there watching, if art is easy for you. If it is, great. Like, I'm really happy for you. It is not easy for me. So fighting with any program is like an extra level of torture. So I try and find whatever is easiest for me personally. And for me, when it comes to painting, when it comes to backgrounds, when it even comes to just drawing and character design, it's Procreate all the way. If Procreate had all of the deep animation features of something like Toon Boom, I would absolutely use it 100% of the time, all the time. It's fun to animate in Procreate, but it's not really robust because it's not an animation software. So I wouldn't recommend animating in it, but in terms of doing backgrounds and things, I think that it's a great program. Definitely worth playing around with if you get a chance. Let me check the chat real quick. Let's see. Okay, I think that I got the questions that popped out. Hailey says Procreate is great. I agree. Really big fan. I did not think that I would like it as much as I do. It took a little while to get used to, and I needed a specific screen protector or cover for the iPad because I didn't like how the Apple Pencil felt on the glass of the iPad. But I found a screen protector. I don't even know what it is because it actually came with the refurbished iPad that I'm using, but it's great. And once I had that and Procreate, I was just like, wow, I can see why people enjoy doing art, because up until then it felt like pulling teeth, but now it's just a joy to do lines. And if I can get it to be a joy all the way across the board, that would be great. But I definitely recommend Procreate and checking that out. So trying to think if there's anything else we want to talk about to touch back on the whole naturalism thing or realistic art style. I do want to say one quick thing about that that's really important, and I think that more young artists especially need to hear it again and again and again. You can not listen to this, right? Because I didn't, but you still need to hear it again and again and again. And when you get older, you're going to be telling other artists this. It really pays to put in the effort to work on your observation of life and your realistic drawing. I'm not saying you need to make that your goal. I'm not saying that you need to spend most of your time on that, but at least some of your time should be spent on things like looking at the natural world, looking at a more realistic style, and then learning the ins and outs of it. Because the better you can understand anatomy, the better you can understand form and perspective and things like that, the more you can almost abandon it. And you can just run in another direction and play and have fun. Because I heard Ferdinand once say, because your tools will be sharp. That is such a great line. When your tools are sharp, when your skill is such that you can just enjoy yourself, you just have fun and you'll just enjoy and you can do all kinds of crazy things. But if you neglect those fundamentals, then some problematic things happen. All right. All right, we got one more question, and then I think we'll probably wrap up. Ice Cream Hero says, how good are you at matching other people's art styles? Personally, it's tricky because, you don't want to toot your own horn, but I'm pretty good at matching other people's art styles. And I think that's a little bit detrimental to me because I've always been so good at just jumping into a different style that I failed to figure out what I want mine to be. You know what I mean? I could just sit down and draw something in Simpson style or Gravity Falls style or whatever style. I can mimic that, but that's not me. You know what I mean? Like it's not my art at that point. It's kind of me. And there's nothing wrong with necessarily copying to learn from, but until you absorb it and you can do your own art that's personal and yours, it's not been useful for me to be able to copy a bunch of different art styles because I start thinking, oh, well, I should put in something that looks like this here, or I should try this style here. And I've never really gotten a chance to super develop my own style. So I don't think I'm bad at matching other people's art styles, but I also think that sometimes that can hold you back because, there's an old saying, jack of all trades, master of none. That's kind of where I'm at right now. After 40 years of art, I have become a jack of all trades, but a master of none. And what I really want is to master something, because that's a pretty cool feeling when you've actually mastered something. So I think that's what I'm going to really shoot for. And that's what the upcoming streams are going to be about. It's going to be about trying to trying to hone a style that I can then master. I don't really care if it looks different from other people's style. I really don't. I just want it to be comfortable. I want it to be something that I can relax and just create, if that makes sense. And I've never, or I should say, I've not had that since I was very young. Since then, I've always been struggling to do the art. It's been a chore. It's been work, just heavy work. And so what I'd like to do is get to a place where what I'm creating or what I want to create is a lot easier, because I'm not fighting 15 different styles, and I'm certainly not fighting the style that not naturally, but came to me easily because I practiced so much as a kid, that newspaper comic style. Oh, it's so easy for me now. I could draw you newspaper comics all day long, but I don't want to. And I think that your art style should be something you love. I loved it once, but now it's time to move on from that. Okay. I think that's about everything. I appreciate the folks who came to chat. I know that this live stream wasn't quite as long as Ferdinand's usually are. He usually gets up there in the 2-hour mark, which I'm very impressed with. But for now, this was kind of an introduction to make sure that everything's working properly and that the iPad could stream to the screen and all that fun stuff. So I hope you'll join me next time, probably in the coming days. I'm glad it was interesting. I hope you'll come and join me in probably the coming days, if not then next week. And we're going to take a look at analyzing female proportions specific to this art style that I hope to one day build. So that's all I've got for today. And so this is JKR from Animator Island signing off, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye, everybody.